Neal Battaglia, saxstation.com. A question that I've seen a lot of times given to me is, how do you learn music by ear? And it seems like most of the time this question is being asked by people who have never tried learning music by ear. So it might seem kind of obvious, but you need to try learning music by ear if you want to learn music by ear. And definitely there's a lot of nuance to it. You can get into knowing the right keys, knowing the right rhythms, knowing how to articulate and phrase, and a lot of elements of music. But the most basic thing is to listen to something and try to play it on your instrument or sing if that's what you're doing. So basically, listen to something, try playing it. You might be completely off at first. It might be very different than what you hear, but you won't know until you try it. So listen to something, try playing it, see how close what you play is. You can try playing along with it. If it's the same, you are doing it right. If it's different, you're not right. So it's really not that conceptually difficult to start. It can be difficult to learn something by ear, especially if it's a complicated piece or if there's a lot of nuance, or if the player who played it originally has a lot of skill and you're trying to emulate that. But the thing you need to do is to try playing music by ear. On Sax Station, I have one lesson where you learn the song Taps. It's 3 notes, it's pretty slow, it's pretty simple. So I tell you what the notes are, I just don't tell you what order they are. You try and play them. So you can start with things that are simple and you can build up. It's kind of like if you're working out, if you're lifting weights, you start with lighter weights and you build up to heavier weights. So I wouldn't recommend starting with Coltrane's solo on Giant Steps as your first thing to learn by ear. I would recommend starting with a slow melody. But at the same time, if you really want to learn that, go for it. It's fine. You can try playing it. You might find it's too difficult for you at your current skill level. And you may need to work on your technique to be able to play certain things that you want to be able to play. That's something you might run into. So basically, I would recommend starting with things that are simple, things that are a little bit slower, but basically listen, try playing it. You might find that it's in a key that you're not comfortable in. Say it's in A flat major on your saxophone, and you can't even play the A flat major scale. Then you might want to learn the scale. It's going to make it easier to learn the melody. A lot of melodies, and definitely not all melodies, but a lot of melodies even just stay in one key. So if it's in a key, that means there's 7 notes instead of 12 notes. For a chromatic scale, there's 7 in the major scale. So if you know the notes of the major scale, it's a lot of times going to be easier to play a melody or some musical idea that's in that key. So knowing your scales is going to help you, knowing rhythms, being able to recognize patterns, hearing changes in the chords, that might help you as well. But again, listen, try playing it. So like I was trying to play a song the other day and I was trying to play along with Kenny G on the song Lullaby. And I was curious how he did it because I heard his version. I knew he played it in one key and then it modulates. It goes up to another key and then it comes back. So I want to see what he did just to check that out. So here's the beginning of that. So I hear 2 notes and then I hear a third note. So you can also think about the notes and whether they seem high or low. I'm using the same instrument as he is, the soprano sax. So da, da, da. Basically that note is not the lowest note. It's not a low B flat. It's not a note with the palm keys. It's not like a. It's somewhere in the middle. So let's pretend I don't know what note it is. Let's say I start here. And let's listen again. See what it sounds like. I think my note was a little bit too low. So let's try this note. That's the note he played. And then if you know your intervals, that also helps a lot with figuring out the notes. So, da, da, da. And it does help to be able to sing. I took a little bit of singing in music classes. So I can kind of sing some notes, but I wouldn't consider myself a very good singer. But that definitely can be very helpful. So da da da. It turns out on this saxophone you go from A to C. So A to C is a minor third. The intervals basically have a certain sound to them, and you can basically maybe think of melodies with these intervals that you've heard before. So like a minor second is like jazz, like that's a half step between the notes. Perfect fifth is like Star Wars, like so the first two notes there are from an A to a G, and I'm probably not playing in the original key. I'm just picking a note to start on. And that's actually another thing to consider. You can basically play a melody starting on any of the 12 notes, and you can play the melody. It will still be the melody. It will just be maybe not in the original key. So it does help to start on the right first note. Otherwise, you're kind of thrown off for everything you do. If I started the song Lullaby on G sharp, even though I'm playing the second note right, it sounds wrong because I started on a higher note for the first note. So basically, yeah, getting the first note is pretty important. It makes you start in the right place. Otherwise, you get thrown off in your direction. Basically, if you start here and you're trying to go here, it's going to sound wrong even if you end up going to the right place, because what you hear in music in terms of the notes is actually a lot of times the interval and the harmonic combinations of the frequencies. So yeah, it helps a lot to get the first note. Another tool that I use actually is what I use personally is a program called Transcribe, which is on the computer, and I can basically loop a small section of the music. It can be 3 seconds, it can be 10 seconds, it could be a minute if I wanted to. So I can repeat something, and that can help you get a section. If you have something that's hard to learn, that can really help a lot, just to loop a 3-second thing. Maybe you get part of it, then you get a little bit more, then you get the rest of it. And maybe it takes you 5 or 6 times or longer. It's okay. You can just loop it, but it becomes easier if it's automatically looping it, if you don't have to keep clicking a button and moving back with a cursor or whatever. There are apps on your phone. There's different ways to do this. Looping can be a really useful thing. And getting that first note can be pretty key to helping you get in the right direction. And so let's go back to the melody on Lullaby. I hear da da da. So, and then the next part, it repeats the same thing. So maybe you hear something, you hear the same thing happening. That means you play the same notes in the same rhythm. Okay, so I spent a little bit of time learning that, and I've probably heard that song a number of times in my life. Not super recently, necessarily, but I was listening to it more once I was learning it. And basically, I kind of know how the melody goes in my head, so I'm trying to match up what's in my head with what I'm playing on the instrument. So, yeah. So to get started learning something, I would recommend starting with something simple. You can follow this link to the song Taps, where I have a video where I play it, I break it up, it's slow, I tell you what the notes are, and you kind of put together the rhythm and the order of the notes. So it's learning music by ear, but it's learning kind of with some hints given along the way. And from that, once you've learned one thing by ear, you can move on to something else you want to learn. Again, I wouldn't recommend getting too complicated too quickly, but learn what you want to learn. Maybe you can handle it, maybe you can't. And if you are really off, maybe you need to work on some things. Maybe you need to learn some certain scales. The scales can be very closely related to certain melodies. Maybe something basically follows a scale going down, or it skips a few notes but basically stays with a scale. That is another advantage of learning the scales. You don't learn the scales just to play scales. You learn the scales so you're comfortable in different keys. They're a tool that you can use in music, and they kind of have a certain flavor to them. Like, I was playing a scale the other day. And maybe maybe a melody follows that scale, and it's going to be helpful to be able to just play the scale if you're going to try and learn the melody that uses the scale. All right, so you start by just listening, trying to play something. After that, you maybe learn what you need to work on. Maybe you need to learn how to play like triplets in a good time, evenly. Maybe you need to swing your notes like the person who plays what you're trying to play is doing. Maybe you need to learn a syncopation with a rhythm. Maybe you need to articulate in a certain way and to make it sound right. Like if I played like St. Thomas, like if I played it like really legato, maybe it'd sound weird. Those are the same notes, but it sounds really different because the articulation is completely not what it should be to fit the style that it was played in originally, the sort of calypso thing. The song's by Sonny Rollins. He named it after one of the islands in the Caribbean. So, yeah, you can get a lot deeper into the music. Basically, learning by ear is learning what the music is and learning how to play it on your instrument. And it can be very complicated. Maybe there's a certain kind of vibrato that you're going to play. Maybe there's a crescendo with dynamics. Maybe you want to hit something and leave some space. There's a lot of things with the music, but you kind of can compare what you play to the recording. So a lot of learning by ear, in my opinion, is listening to something a lot of times. If you hear something once and you can play it right away, that's cool. If you hear something once and you sort of get it, and then you have to keep listening and then keep trying, that's fine. And you're probably going to get faster with this process as you go along. The more practice, the more you develop this skill of learning music by ear. You do need to be very aware. You don't want to hear something, play something, and assume it's right. You want to be pretty careful, listen, and see if you're right. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. If I heard again, let's go back to the lullaby. If I heard something and it's supposed to be like this, you can think kind of qualitatively, does the note go up? Does it go down? If I played instead, I'm starting in the wrong place and I'm going down. It would be closer if I went like this. That doesn't quite sound right, but it sounds closer when I'm going in an ascending way with that interval. And if I played the right interval, even if I'm starting in the wrong place, it'd be like. That's actually also a minor third. I'm going from a low C to an E flat. So that sounds closer to what the melody should be. It's not starting in the same place as the recording that I heard, but it is the same interval. So basically I could play the melody. So that basically uses a different key. You can think of it as a different scale. I had a flat in there, again on the soprano sax, which is in B flat, same key as the tenor. Yeah, be aware that you might play something, it might sound kind of right. If you start in the wrong place, though, you probably want to correct that pretty quickly. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to learn something from the recording that's in a different key because it might just throw you off. So listen to something, try playing it, kind of observe how close you are, start fixing things, and then maybe if you're really off, you try and learn a smaller section of it. Maybe learn 3 seconds instead of 7 seconds. If you have like software where you can loop something, that's going to help. If you have someone who's helping you out, maybe have them just play a little piece, maybe have them slow it down. Don't hesitate so much to learn something by ear. It's really just listening, trying to play it. And even if you're kind of at a basic level, you can start doing this. And even if you're completely wrong, you can start doing this and you can learn from that. You can build from there. I was talking to Ferris from Saxophone, who plays the trombone, and he was telling me when you're writing out like a score for the bands and you're learning it by ear, it actually is a lot better to have something that's really rough and then build from there than to have a blank piece of paper. Because if you have something rough, you can fix it. If you have a blank piece of paper, that's kind of almost intimidating. You're like, oh, you might not know even what to put down. And it's going to be easier to fix something kind of comparing it to what you know with your experience, what you know about intervals, what you know about rhythms, what you know about articulation, than it is to just start with something and assume you need to get it right away. Like, you probably will be able to do that later on as you develop this skill of learning music by ear, but especially early on, you're probably going to make a lot of mistakes. So don't worry too much about the mistakes. Try listening to something, try playing it, and see how close you are, see what you need to fix, see maybe the technique, the scales you need to learn, the rhythms you need to study, the feels with the drums and the bass, and how you need to kind of fit into the music with your instrument. There's a lot to get into in learning music by ear, but the first step is to listen and try playing it. So do that. And yeah, again, I recommend this video that I made with taps. You can start playing it. I feel like this one is pretty unintimidating to get started with, especially with basically the hints I give. I tell you what the notes are. I play it really slowly. I break it into pieces. If you want to learn a certain song, you can also check out the classes on Sax Station. There's one where you can pick the song that you want to learn, and I'll help you with it. There's another one that gets a lot more challenging, in my opinion, and I give you a bunch of different things to work on. And if you're up for a challenge, you can kind of work through them systematically and develop the skill that you have. So yeah, it can be difficult to learn music by ear, but try it. See how it goes. See what you need to change. See what you need to work on. It is a skill you can develop. It's a skill that you're not going to necessarily have immediately, but it's something that you can work on and build. So try it out. Let me know if you're interested in getting the classes. If you want to buy something and get some help from me, I can help you out with this, and you might work through it a little bit quicker than you might on your own. It can help to have someone kind of listen to what you do and see and tell you what they hear. And as you go along, you're going to develop your own ear and be able to learn music by ear more effectively yourself.